Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to GAN TV. You are on Talk to Me. Tonight is an important conversation about the ongoing war. It's a lot of question. It seems that the world is divided. On one part, some people believe that we have to stop this war through a peace process. On the other side, it looks like some people or some organization that believe that this war have to just keep going. So with me to help me in this analysis of this situation is my friend Gustavo Anvela, senior political analyst here at GAN TV. Welcome, my friend.
Oh, it's good to be with you.
Absolutely. Now you probably saw the speech that the Pope gave, calling on both sides to bring about peace. You know, both sides. He didn't try to single out any party. He just said, "Listen, think about your people. It is about time to bring about peace." Unfortunately, we don't have the video right here, but I'm sure you saw it. But you have your own opinion on this. So, do you think this is about time that we find a solution to this war that might escalate to something even bigger than what we see right now?
And that's the greatest fear I have is an escalation. I know that whether you're talking about the Pope or whether you're talking about political figures, I think the cessation of the violence is a must. It's unfortunate that it's taken this far along, the loss of life on both sides. And when I say both sides, I'm not talking about what happened out in Charlottesville, both sides. I'm talking about an illegal invasion of a sovereign country by Vladimir Putin. At this point, with all the political theater and the rhetoric, which is very heated, I think it's important for sober minds to sit down and form a strategic plan. Number one, cessation of violence, talks, discussions as to annexation. I think the Pope, as you know, he has billions of people under his flock, did his best to wave his white flag of surrender, not surrendering in terms of people not wanting to talk, but surrendering that we have lives and souls that have been lost. So I stand on the side of the Pope and the Vatican and all parties who want to engage in peaceful negotiations because there's strength in peace.
Absolutely. Listen, my friend, you are an Olympic athlete. Most of this to go to a competition like that, you need preparation, a lot of preparation, and I do believe the result. I mean, the war that we saw, that we are observing from a distance from this war in Ukraine didn't just happen like that. I think when people said that this is an unjust attack on Ukraine, but we also have to take some distance then to question ourselves on the how we get there, how we get here, to the point where now Russia have to feel obligated to attack Ukraine. I'm not taking sides. I'm just trying to analyze. Now, Russia have to feel obligated to attack a sovereign country, and now in the middle of this war, like we said a couple of days ago, it looks like there's some momentum from the Ukraine side. Now all of a sudden, Ukraine don't want any possibility for peace with Putin. So how can we go about solving such a situation? First, I just want us to, from a very neutral position, to understand both sides. Because if that was America, remember in the 60s when Russian, put those missiles in Cuba, you know how nervous America was. And that was almost an act of war. So do you think it's fair for us also to think that Russia felt the same way, to see a neighborhood country with serious weapon of mass destruction within its border? Should Russia has one of the biggest country, one of the most powerful countries, react the way it should?
Well, I think with regard to you alluding to the Bay of Pigs with President Kennedy, that was a situation where I think in many ways President Kennedy was kept in the dark by his intelligence folks, Mr. Dulles and others. And I really think that behind the scenes that Mr. Khrushchev and John F. Kennedy were probably becoming close friends and allies. And there's some people who didn't want peace. That might be the case here. War profiteering.
Yeah.
People who make money off of war, munitions, tanks, satellites, surface to air missiles, all that stuff. So you have to ask yourself, for example, as someone whose grandfather was a German Jew, why is it that the state of Israel seems to be perpetually in a state of war? There's always chaos and instability. There are people who make money off of this. And there are people who, Malik, you and I both know that conflict, for example, the news media. The news media thrives on conflict. How often do you hear about the birds are singing, the sky is blue, the kids, everyone got an A in their class? It's usually a car crash, a war, a pandemic,
Yes.
a coup d'etat. And
Yeah.
so you have these panoply of issues. So war profiteering is something that I think should not be looked over. And I believe that Mr. Putin, when in his capacity as prime minister, when Mr. Medvedev was president, was probably thinking this through all along. And don't underestimate the previous president of the United States and his relationship with Mr. Putin. And perhaps that may have emboldened him for one reason or another. That is
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that is an excellent point of view because we are caught up in that. He says, she says, whatever the case might be, blaming one part of the equation. But if you look closely, the situation, I will get to this conflict. There's some reasonable conclusion we can draw about now creating the situation in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
That was I think Russia felt like they was provoked literally into this war.
Yeah. There may have been that. I also think that Mr. Putin was very nostalgic. He was a former KGB agent when it was known as the Soviet Union. All these, whether you're talking about the Belarus or Ukraine or all these areas which have now broken off into individual republics. So for those people who are nostalgic, for whatever reason, and the nostalgia that comes with that, I can understand it. But you also have people who are sovereign countries. They speak the same, as you know, Ukrainian and Russia, same kind of language, same dialect. And I have a very good friend who I knew back in Pennsylvania who had told me about some of these differences. But I'm really troubled when I think of war profiteering. I kind of think in terms of the slave trade. How many countries on earth, whether Great Britain, the United States, and others, got a head start on life because of the slave trade, not paying people, men and women, for their labor? And so I heard this figure where in Great Britain, for example, there might be trillions of dollars that they could owe the Caribbean countries in terms of slave trade. Let's not kid ourselves.
But
What's going on rest of the back of slaves? I know we're diverting, but it seems kind of
no,
constant.
no, 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 no.
People are profiting, whether it's human capital or in this case, munitions. There's
You have
always
a solid point, and since you taking the conversation on that side of the equation, I know we're not changing gears here because there's some kind of relationship with everything you're saying. Now, you probably heard the conversation with Don Lemon that went viral. Some kind of a subject from the Crown of England was telling this man, that black man, that African have to be responsible. They were waiting on the shore of Africa with African in cages, waiting for European to come in and buy Africans. And people, a lot of those people that think slavery was something good. There's no anything to blame on it. They applaud, and the video definitely went viral. Do you really think that African people were sitting on the shore? I mean, on those beaches with cages full of African, calling for Europeans to come in and buy Africans? Is that a solid argument when it comes to this reparation conversation?
Absolutely not. And I'm going to do something that I don't often do is I'm going to exercise restraint and patience in my response. What could possibly anyone think? The human spirit strives for freedom. Who in their right mind would think that 400 or 500 years ago, Africans, who probably didn't even know about the existence of Europeans, were waiting with bated breath to have their lives destroyed, their families destroyed, taken away from their country, their languages, children sold off into other parts, raped, pillaged, men castrated, women having to give birth by all of the craziness that the critical race theory touches upon. And I think there's some aspects, matter of fact, I know whether it's Governor DeSantis and others in Florida, who do not want the tragedy of slavery and how some of the ancestors in Florida, in Alabama, in Washington, D.C., in Oregon, benefited from that. So that's just a reality. Now we're not impugning people's guilt upon that. Well, if we can talk about
No,
history,
no,
talk
no.
about
My problem is the mockery, the
yeah, the
mockery
mockery.
on
Yeah,
on the major network like Fox News. You saw people completely making fun of John Lemon, suggesting that some of the billions that the royal family have, you know, just unjustly get from the slave trade and everything that in this the activity of selling people, from Africa. It was just a suggestion, but they're talking about schooling Don Lemon, and by schooling, they don't even know that that so-called royal expert is talking about Great Britain, and I know there's nothing great about UK. Great Britain was the first nation to abolish slavery, and not knowing that actually it's 80 that was the first nation that abolished slavery. I know this is can be this conversation we can have
no,
it.
but just put it this way. I think that man's inhumanity to man, that is bondage, slavery, rape, pillage, has just been a variation. We had slavery, right? Now we have people who are slaves to wars, to conflict. And so in the end, it's all about money. But I take great offense to people. And,
Human
as
trafficking is another one. Human
yeah,
trafficking.
human trafficking and women of children in countries throughout the U.S., the world, and Africa. So no one comes to the table with clean hands. However, for people to suggest that other people wanted their lives turned inside out to where here we are on October 6, 2022, talking about slavery. Now, for you and I who are Africans, our perspective is a little bit different than our African American brothers who we are sympathetic to. But there's also part of us that say, listen, how much culpability, how much blame do you want to go back? How far back in time? I have two daughters, aged 22 and 28, and their mother is half black, half Japanese. So they're Americans. So they understand their perspective as American, particularly this social media. There's this generation, Malika, you think you'd agree, are very savvy, and they're not putting up with foolishness of people like Putin or people like Bongo or the people like Tito Obiang. Anytime you have people who are on the receiving end of unjust behavior, of unjust actions, people are going to respond. Slavery was wrong. The United States of America had a role in slavery. The United Kingdom has a problem. And you see what's happening in the United Kingdom with IRA, Belfast, and all the terrorists going that spawned out. So for some
But
reason,
you could have expecting some kind of decency, like saying that starting with saying slavery was wrong.
yeah,
But the narrative, the ongoing narrative that always suggests that we have to blame the victim is something that cannot be comfortable with. It's like right now our conversation is around Putin attacking a sovereign country.
yeah,
Even though we can give any reason possible here, we also know there's another way to solve issues.
yeah.
You call somebody, you have a conversation, and trying to use diplomacy to solve an issue. Instead of if you go and destroy a country, destroy a life, and then turn around now you want a peace, then why you went to the war in the first place?
And my
So
question is, the
yeah,
country the country that he wants to go back, Malik, and you've made some excellent points. He's destroyed it, so he's going back to a country where is he? There's no houses. The infrastructure has been torn up. The waterways have been disrupted. So you are pummeling areas that eventually you say you want to govern or annex. Does that make sense? So unless you're trying to terrorize people, and I believe that Vladimir Putin has engaged in crimes against humanity. I believe that his Mr. Sergei Lavrov, who recently met with people from Equatorial Guinea, by the way, is engaging in crimes against humanity. His fellow, I wouldn't say Russians, Ukrainians, but man's and humanity. And I would call upon the United Nations, just with this great speed as it would go into conflict areas of Africa, the United Nations needs to make a presence known in the Ukraine and Russia and bring this to an end. This is
But
enough. Putin
yeah,
is a bully, and I salute Mr. Zelensky, and we stand with the people of Ukraine during this very
absolutely.
challenging time. I
But
will not.
my friend, one of the reasons why such operation is difficult because if we don't aim for justice, because as an educator, what we do is when kids get into it, there's something we call restorative justice. But it seems to me that that is a concept that is lacking, is missing in our political discourse, and sometimes the way we deal with international relations. Because imagine when somebody feel like you have done some damage to me, the least you can do is to apologize. But you said no. The Ukrainian people, they provoke it. They're the reason why I act the way I attack. So we have to blame the victim. We have to blame the Africans because we, in our imagination, we imagine them waiting there. They were just going about their business. You show up, with guns and intimidation, you kill people, you force people into slavery, and then you turn around and say, "Hey, listen, what about some of the, traders, slave traders that actually die to fight against their friends that was making this slave trade go on?" I think we need a serious conversation because for most people, what they are scared of the word reparation. I think that is a trigger when most Westerners when they hear reparation, they freak out
Yeah.
because the idea that we might have equal equal
Yep.
wealth is something that is very threatening to to some people, and it should not be like that.
Do you know
you
that
know
there's some people who actually believe, Malik, and I even saying this, I don't want to give oxygen. People who say that slavery was a good thing. People were able to
yeah,
work. They
Mr.
were
O'Reilly said they
and
were well
so
fed.
when you have people who have that kind of level, first of all, it's easy to say slavery is a good thing if you're the beneficiary, whether it's the founding fathers who were all slave owners, the founding fathers who slept with their minor children, the slaves, in order to bear children, some of whom are ancestors are running around here. And so I take great offense. These are conversations that we all can have. But people must ask themselves, and as an immigrant, as someone who's been a beneficiary of education, of peace and security, having gone to Stanford, ran the Olympics for my native country, people have to ask yourself, do you think it's any coincidence that a country like the United States of America, which had 400 years of slavery, that it's a superpower? If you had free labor for 400 years, why would you not think that you'd be a superpower? You don't think
And then
Venezuela or Iran, all these rogue nations. But remember, I'm not an anti-American. I'm just talking the facts, though.
no,
And when you have a head start, you're free labor. How many people do you know right now, Malik, would go to their law firm and work for free all day long? Would go down and perform neurosurgery for free. So what I want African Americans to say is that you matter. Your intellectual capacity matters. Those of your ancestors matter. And as an African, I hope to take the skills that I've learned here with my brother Malik and other Africans and go back to the motherland and say, hey, listen, we're going to try to have a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and get rid of all the rot of the dictators and see what we can do to bring about an African form of democracy. Because, the excuse that a lot of these, speak about a war and conflict, a lot of the excuse that these African despots use is they say, oh, we're only 50, 60 years away from democracy and independence. That's the excuse they use. But they say, look at the United States. It's 250 years, and they still have elections, which they have supposedly fraud elections. They have attempted coup d'etats, as some have suggested, on January 6th. They're saying, well, how could you guys come back to our little country, whether it's Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Cameroon, Angola, and say, enough. People can play dumb, but we're not dumb, and the world's watching, and more importantly, the world's watching Africa. And so I salute you once again, Malik, for shining the light on Ukraine and Africa. To the end, we're all part of this human condition that they call humanity.
Absolutely. Well, welcome back to Talk to Me on Gen TV. We're here with Mr. Gustavo Mvela, giving his perspective on what's going on. So let bring back this conversation on who actually profit from the chaos, from the war. And you mentioned, America was dual slavery for 400 years. When you see something like that, inhumane or war going on, when it lasts too long, it looks like it lasts too long because there is people that actually have interest. There's special interest that make chaos a business.
Monetizing chaos.
Yeah. So do you think part of the reason why it's going to be very difficult for us to have peace in Ukraine is because when you see the aid that, for example, our own country here in the United States, when they give money, that the money don't directly go to the Ukrainian. It will go to Lucky Martin, some of these companies that create weapon makers. So the money goes back into those organizations to buy weapon. So if they make profit, what will be you think they will be motivated to help to stop this war?
There's no incentive. Just think, these guys are in the defense industry. Well, you're in the defense industry. That means you're playing the role of the aggressor or defending yourself from something which you perceive to be an enemy or a fake enemy. And so I have no problem with McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed Martin, DynCorp Corporation, all these individuals, MPRI, and all these other folks. But because at the end, there's of this rainbow of defense, there are human lives. And so when you're in these boardrooms, and I've been in these boardrooms where people talk about the strategic interest and multilateralism and the financial, but they actually count the cost financially of how many lives might be lost. They figure that into their budget, and it's like almost like you're playing Monopoly, but you're not but you're monopolizing the lives and freedom and democracy of innocent people. Look at some of these. When you see some of these images of these kids who are like in a movie theater, and they put outside the movie theater, right on site, this is where children are. Do not bomb. And Putin and his people months ago did that. So there comes a point to where the devil has his playground. For those of us, I come from 4 generations of Presbyterian ministers. But there's definitely a fiendish, diabolical component. I don't know when it's going to stop, but don't underestimate, Malik, the fact that there might be people who want to keep this war going on in order to hurt the U.S. election for Joe Biden, the midterms, and presidential. There's some people who may just want this to perpetuate. I salute Mr. Zelensky. I hope the money that the U.S. taxpayers are sending to Ukraine in the form of aid packages will help him, and that they go to the right people, and that people aren't enriching themselves 4 or 5 years down the road, living in Beverly Hills or Upper East Side of Manhattan or the 20 areas of England. It's time for the people of Ukraine and those on the Russian to bring an end to this, so that world order and peace and stability, given the fact that we're living kind of precarious times, can go back to quote unquote normal. And I'm not quite sure what that is anymore.
That's very interesting, because it's I think part of the problem here is the contradiction. I know Ukraine have to defend themselves, but if we really cares about peace, if we continue to feed them with weapon of mass destruction, on the other side, Russia will feel like his back is against the wall, and he's probably will start to use heavier weapon that he has on his disposal. He already said, if I feel, if there's a point where I feel threatened, I would definitely use any weapon to defend myself and my people. That is on record. Everybody knows that. On the other side, you see North Korea, you know, kind of giving us, putting us on notice. Say, you know what? If you start it, we know, right? North Korea won't be an American ally or Ukraine ally. It definitely, I suspect it will be definitely on the Russian side, because he knows, if it's not Russia, it's me. So he knows that. So he kind of display his muscles and say, hey, listen, you better stay there with this nonsense, because me, I will use whatever I have. So when you see how the trajectory of this kind of activities, and the Pope, wisely came and say, hey, listen, this got to stop right now. When you listen to people like Noam Chomsky, one of the strongest voice, in not only here in America, is this guy is respected on the global scale, saying it's possible that if we don't pay attention or be wise to stop this kind of conflict, we can this world as we know, our human experience can completely disappear. So I think it makes sense that the news media become a little bit responsible, because this is not at one point it won't be anymore about Russia versus Ukraine. This is a human being experience that can be put in jeopardy.
Yeah.
You know,
This is not a video game. This is not a video game. We can turn off. This isn't Call of Duty or all these other things. I don't even know. I go back to days of Atari, so I'm not an expert. But this is not a video game. Real lives are being lost, and I hope that those individuals, whether in the halls of the U.S. Congress, whether in the Kremlin, or whether in Kiev, or anywhere in the world, that they do not use this as an example of how to resolve conflict, because this is out of hand, and other countries are watching out. Mind you, as chaos is brewing in Ukraine and Russia, other things are happening in other parts of the world. So don't think that the world is solely focused here. There are countries that can chew and walk and do all sorts of stuff at the same time. So as you hear what's going on in Ukraine, don't take your eye off what's going on in Asia, in Africa, and other parts of the world. So do not allow this war conflict to misdirect you from the global scene, because there's a whole lot going on, my friend, as you and I sit here comfortably in the United States and America without having to worry about air raids or going into bomb shelters.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Africa. It's about time to change gears here, and we talk about a little bit about Africa as usual, international politics, just in a minute. Well, welcome back again. You mentioned Africa, and we also know that on a global scale, we have major players like Russia, China, United States, France, for that matter, England, a little bit kind of a laid back when it comes to the African politics. I'm talking about the physical involvement. The French is more physical when it comes to its presence in Africa. You saw the events in Mali. You saw the uprising of young people completely don't want to deal with the politics of the politics of the neo-politics in Africa. So when you see Russia making its way slowly but strongly in places like Mali, should we at least say to America, wait a second, and it has to be a way where in places like on the continent of Africa, this is some kind of balance of power. Otherwise, what kind of situation we can expect to have if China or Russia take over?
Well, this is the case that I've voiced this in my 32 years of geopolitics and talking about the U.S. Africa paradigm. I've told officials both here and in Europe that China and Russia now are going to be a active competitors on the continent. And I think what we need to also be aware of that there could be a China-Russia bloc that's formed.
Mm.
Now, China obviously comes in with its shoddy infrastructure. It's very well known. It's human rights abuses. It's racism. It's, hey, we're going to give you a stack of money to the heads of state, as it did in Equatorial Guinea, in its building of a military base. And once again, we asked China and Russia to leave Equatorial Guinea. With regard to Russia, they have the Wagner Group. They bring their mercenaries. Wagner, W-A-G-N-E-R. I encourage you all to Google that. They bring with them chaos, destruction, but people don't realize that these mercenaries, that the targets are often civilians. They're not there to protect, these despots. They go there to terrorize the citizenry so that they won't get to the heads of state. So I would encourage the African Union to have a spine. We know that the African Union is also the beneficiary of a lot of Chinese wealth. The African Union itself, the building in Addis Ababa was built by the Chinese. And so I reject the Chinese and the African continent. I believe in multilateralism. I believe we live in a multipolar world. But the Chinese, and if you go Google any tape regarding Africa and the mistreatment of China and its African workers, it's dehumanizing, it's degrading, and it's reminiscent of slavery in America.
So I suspect that part of the your argument came to a situation of, you and me have been fighting for democracy in Africa for years. And for those who can remember our early shows on Game TV here, it's always been, promotion of democracy in some of the some parts of Africa, including Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, for this matter. Do you think the fear, or I suspect your argument was about to maybe make people believe that if they take over, from France, or if America is not involved in terms of trying to regulate what's going on, can we end up with a situation where those so-called despots or head or dictators in Africa will feel like now they have their hands free? And can we forget about the process of democracy itself, as we and most of our African young people in Africa or believe in, or dream of? You think that this is going to be a difficult, if they take over, then, because you say China come, of course they bring infrastructure, they help with all of that, but they usually don't care about human rights and what is your countries have a democratic process. They don't get involved in domestic politics. But the reverse side of this is the ability of some leaders, because we already have a history of having some dictators now on the continent. Do you think those leaders or those dictators would be more comfortable in the wrongdoings on the continent?
To be honest, and this is just my assessment, but I think that the world has grown fatigued of African dictators. I think their shelf life is up. I think that this generation, and I include myself, but also my daughter's generation, they're realizing that these guys, and I call them clowns and buffoons, with great ease, that people have grown weary of it. How can you be in power, as the case for Tito Obiang, for 43 years? And before that, it was his uncle. That's just an example. But there's something that's rotten in African politics, that these individuals do not allow the intellectual capacity, the vitality of their population to shine through. What are they afraid of? Why are they so afraid of democracy? Why are they so afraid of good governance, civil society, free and fair elections? I'm going to tell you, too, this doesn't excuse the multinationals. The oil companies want to put people in positions or support people who can be easily manipulated and are more concerned about mansions in France and cars here and there, but not clean water, education, healthcare. And so, as someone who looks with great vigor on wanting to help bring about a change in the democratic landscape of Equatorial Guinea and Africa, I think we all can do better. And it starts with, first of all, our countries rebuilding and reimagining itself. Think about it. Most of these countries just know one thing: dictators. They know just one family. Some of these people don't even know anyone but Obiang or Bongo. But for those of us who've been around, we know. I was born when it was actually Spanish Guinea. So all I can say is that I remain optimistic about the human spirit. I remain optimistic that dictators in Africa are coming to an end. And I want the United States of America, the European Union, NATO, and the African Union to say, hey, listen, enough's enough. The status quo cannot be. And France, still receiving money, billions and billions of dollars from its former colonies. Enough's enough. Quit using Africa as a 21st century plantation.
Absolutely. But mention France receiving, or close to, I mean, more than 5 billion, 500 billion every
Billion
year.
every year.
For no reason.
Passive
And
income.
yeah, passive income from it's former colonies. But isn't it historically proven that uh, part of the issue that young Africans, the uprising that you see right now, the refusal, the rejection of the French politics is due to that. Because after a while, we've seen history repeated itself. When France was kicked out from Haiti, you know what happened. You know, Haiti have to pay a huge price for its own freedom. And I wish we have that lady back here, the one that was on Don Lemon show. I wish to have her on the show too.
Invite her on the show. I look
Yeah,
forward to
she
debating
needs
her
to come up here so
in a
we
constructive
can
way,
teach her.
debating
You
and
know, you know,
debating in a constructive way. I have a difficult time. We could talk about, as an African Americans or Africans, we can talk about slavery just like we can talk
right.
about the slave owners. I have no problem anyone of any shade talking about colonialism, neocolonialism, slavery. But when you want to inject a Fox News component
Right.
or a
That was
narrative,
absolutely a Fox
we
News
can't play a
component.
game. And
So
especially
so
when you're shaping young minds, right? You're shaping young minds.
absolutely.
You need to
And
present
this
as
this is,
much as
I
truth
mean,
as possible.
CNN is a respected network, and I,
Yeah,
and I suggest that when you bring somebody, it has to be somebody who knows what she's talking about. She was
yeah.
talking about Great Britain being the first country that abolished slavery, which is wrong. And you mentioned France about how much residual income France get, but just taking out of the hands of Africans, residual income. And that doesn't surprise me when I see historical evidence that France never go away when they
When you
lose something. And
when
and I suspect whatever happening here right now in Mali, where they've been kicked out of Mali. Of course, we don't want going from one master to another. But the
exactly.
fact of the matter is, they have a history of making the people that they oppress pay for their own freedom. Now,
Exactly.
Haiti being a clear example that France had to make these people pay billion because they fought for their freedom. So I suspect that they would use some kind of a game trying to come back and trying to make Mali pay for fighting for
I
freedom.
call upon all of the men, women, and children on the African continent today, October 6th, 2022, 6 days before my country's 54th year of independence. Stand up, complain, resist, use social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Do not allow 21st century slavery to take over. Protest the African Union. Have them do more. Your voice matters. They say that even the oceans are made up of droplets of water. Contribute your voice, your drop to democracy, freedom, justice, human rights, human dignity, free, fair, transparent elections. I love the African continent. I love our intellectual capacity. I don't like when people use the term national security interest, which basically means, hey, your country has resources that we want to take. That's all national security interest means. And so we can all, in negotiations about give and take. But as my late father used to say in diplomacy, diplomacy or neutrality depends upon the side with which you're on. So, it depends what side you're on in terms of neutrality. It's kind of an oxymoron, but I'm on the side of democracy. I'm on the side of Africa. I'm on the side of understanding that we live in a codependent world, but this codependency doesn't have to be a slave master dynamic. We all deserve a seat at the table, full of pride, and make sure that our voice has as much weight as anyone else's. And lastly, isn't it amazing when we look at the history of life, the history of the United States and other parts of the world, that most wars have been started by the fragile European male ego. Fragile,
Yeah,
not strong.
yeah. I mean, all you have to do is just go back and read history. My friend Gustavo Mvala, it was a pleasure to have you again tonight, and we're gonna continue this fight.
And I
And
want to say
to
one more thing. How many, you don't know, how many people can you name? How many people have color have started global wars? Think about that. People of color have started global wars. Go back in history.
right now, we are focusing on trying to find a way how to stop
Ukraine.
a war that can be very dangerous. I can
We,
include all the other parts of the world. Already we've seen the impact, economic impact.
yes.
You know,
Food chain
so
supplies,
if,
gasoline, but we pray
if,
for the people of Ukraine. And once again, Gustavo Vella, President of the Federation of Democracy Justice, and Gain, senior political analyst, I stand on the side of the men, women, and children of Ukraine.
any message to those who profit from the war? And also they also be I mean should we should have a message to these people that whether the people individually or organizations that actually make tons and tons of money when some crisis like this happen.
I hope that the IRS is watching. I hope the IRS does all it can to tax individuals in the defense industry, that they get those special privileges, tax brackets. And also, speaking of people who want to go in, I heard that Mike Pompeo recently went to my country. I'm not sure if he's working as a lobbyist, but I would encourage him that any funding that he may receive from the government of Equatorial Guinea, that he report it appropriately, just like anyone else would. It's important for us people not to go to foreign countries, Mr. Pompeo or anyone else, and then try to repatriate funds without reporting. All I can say is that, the world's a big place, but there's always people who are watching and watching and watching.
Absolutely. As always, help is on the way. You
Yes,
know.
it is.
Okay, my friend. We're here. The fight is on,
Yes.
and we're gonna continue to come back here to give our perspective on Get TV. So
Thank you.
that
And show your
was
support for Gain TV. Malik's doing great things. Please show your support. Give and give generously.
absolutely. Please support Gen TV so we can bring our own perspective on what's going on in our world. Thank you, my friend. I'll talk to you later.